Chapter 23, The Journey into Hell. On Saturday, April 16th, 1977, we didn't go to work as usual. A prison officer entered our cell early in the morning to announce that all inmates had to bring their belongings to the front yard for a routine inspection. At Thuduk Camp, inspections usually happen before any transfers, so we always had to be ready to leave. We had to bring all personal items to the yard, lay them out separately, and wait for the officer or the competition committee to examine them. According to camp rules, we were not allowed to keep any sharp object for safety reasons, or store dried food, salt, or chili to prevent escape attempts. However, they had the authority to confiscate anything they wanted. We often hid illegal items in discreet places, or left them in our cells to use later, or if we were transferred, we left them behind for others. The officers and the competition committee were aware of this, so they searched meticulously, both in the yard and in the cells. Yet, it was impossible for them to find everything we had hidden. I had just recovered from a cold over the past few days, more like typhoid fever, and had lost quite a bit of hair. A fellow inmate, Dr. Tun that hung, treated me with acupuncture, eucalyptus steam therapy, using leaves gathered in the camp, and some Tylenol pills. Some inmates claimed Tun that hung was a fake doctor because he couldn't speak with a Hugh accent despite being part of the Royal Tun, that lineage, and looked too young for his supposed age of 50. He had shown me his documents. Dr. Tun that hung, a graduate of the University of Lyons Medical School in France, with an acupuncture certificate from Tokyo, Japan. I couldn't tell if he was a real doctor or not, but in that situation, I had no choice but to entrust my life to him. I would later meet him again 5 years later when I returned to Thuduk Camp. By then, he was no longer a doctor, but just another inmate like everyone else. He was released in 1985 after 10 years of re-education, reportedly for using forged documents, according to his release notice. That morning, I had a feeling I would be transferred because I had heard that some inmates from elsewhere had arrived the previous day. I didn't understand why I had this premonition, but ever since being detained for investigation after my friends were taken away in 1976, I had always prepared myself for departure. The newly issued 3-year re-education notice was utterly meaningless to me. I had grown skeptical of any announcements from the party and the state about policies for personnel of the puppet military and government. They claimed we needed to make progress within 3 years to receive the party and state's leniency. I thought it was just another play on words. I didn't know how long I would remain in the camp or how much I could endure. Deep down, I wish my family would forget about me, consider me dead since the days of liberation. 1 month, 1 year, then 3 years. And how many more years would I have to stay in the camp? I didn't want to stay at Thuduk Camp because it was too close to my home. I didn't want to give my family false hope, only for them to be disappointed when they realized the truth. Perhaps being transferred far away would be a solution. With that in mind, I brought my belongings to the yard without worry. That day, Dan, an inmate from the competition committee, was only allowed to observe as 4 officers meticulously searched every inmate's belongings after conducting body searches. It was the first time we had been so thoroughly inspected. I guess my intuition was right. After the search, another officer came with a list and called out the names of inmates. Those called stayed in the yard, while those not named could return to their cells. For one inmate who was too ill to come to the yard, an officer called another inmate to take his place to make up the numbers. I saw some of my friends, Tuan, Han, Lok, Trung, Vin, and Tam, among those selected to leave. However, others who had held high-ranking positions, like Tsang, former Special Commissioner, Luong, Director of A10, and Trang, Director of A8, returned to the cell. We were moved to Section A of Thuduk Camp and detained in a middle room near the gate of the section. From there, we could see the newly arrived inmates, most of whom had long hair and sun-darkened skin, as if they had just come out of the jungle. Most of them were younger than us. Suddenly, I heard a voice singing a sorrowful refrain over and over again. On a winter morning, the young soldier in prison, with his hands clutching the bars, gazing into the distance. The soldier softly says, "My darling, oh my darling, because I dared not kill, I became a prisoner. Because I dared not kill, I am now far from you." Vin, who used to be my agent, shouted to ask where they were from, and I heard a voice in the next room reply, "Tay Nin." I guess they had been in camps in the VC's OD zone, and were now brought here to be transferred with us to another place. Thura camp was only a transit point, since I had been held for investigation. I had always prepared for departure, because I didn't think the communists would keep us so close to Saigon. But the question was, when would we leave and where would we go? An island, the Truong Son Mountains, or North Vietnam were the places that came to mind. Deep down, I still hoped it would be somewhere in the south, so at least I would remain on my land. I couldn't yet think of the North as my country, even though it was technically part of Vietnam. The pith helmets of Northerners, their yellow khaki uniforms, bicycles, rubber sandals, and their faces filled with hostility seemed so alien to me. During the war, we faced a VC, but we didn't hate them. We weren't angry with them. When speaking of the Northern leaders, we still used polite terms. In contrast, they always hated us, as if they wanted to kill us if they could. They had been taught hatred from school. The images of Northern children in uniforms with red scarves shouting fierce slogans haunted me. What would become of my children in such a society? Even during the war, I had only wished for a decent society, not a brutal one. The song lyrics being sung repeatedly made me think of the future society, or perhaps the present. Because I dared not kill, I became a prisoner. What a tragic situation. Lunch and dinner were brought to us by Tsong and Trang, our former bosses. They didn't dare speak to us, and only looked at us with sorrowful eyes. In the camp, those who stayed behind at least knew their living conditions, but those who were transferred had to accept whatever hardships might await them elsewhere. I thought I had to accept whatever happened to me, because I had placed my life in the hands of my enemies. The best course of action was to silently endure any misfortune that came, even death if necessary. I consoled myself with the Buddhist teaching that life is temporary, death is a return. Around midnight, while I was sleeping, a guard entered the cell and called us to wake up and prepare for departure. I had been ready for this moment, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly. I hurriedly packed my clothes and bedding into my backpack. The leftover food from my family's visit during Tet, like a can of sugar, a container of brown rice powder, and some dried shredded meat, I managed to stuff into the two small side pockets of my backpack. I tied my poncho securely to one side of the backpack, strapped my water canteen to the other, and placed my woven mat on top before fastening the backpack lid tightly. Everything was prepared as if I were a soldier getting ready for a march. I tried the backpack on my shoulders, then set it back on the floor and waited. Everyone in the cell was ready. The lights in the yard suddenly turned on. Guards were moving around and talking loudly. I could hear the sound of vehicles outside the wall, separating the prison from the main gate. About an hour later, a guard accompanied by two armed men entered the cell and called out the names of the inmates. We lined up and followed the two armed guards through a small door to the front yard. Several Molotova trucks were already parked there, and we were loaded onto the covered beds of the trucks after being handcuffed in pairs using a crude type of shackle made by local blacksmiths. These shackles had no chains, so we couldn't move our hands easily. It was the first time I had ever been handcuffed, but I didn't think much of it and didn't feel ashamed either. I accepted this as something inevitable in the camp, and I knew I would likely have to endure even worse things in the future. 2 armed guards sat on either side of the truck bed, which held about 40 inmates. We had to wait until all 410 prisoners were loaded onto the trucks. The convoy left Thuda camp at around 4 a.m. on April 17, 1977. I had been at this camp for exactly 7 months and 12 days. 10 Molotova trucks, led by a smaller vehicle, left the camp gates early in the morning. There were already a few bicycles on the streets. I saw someone in the truck throw something onto the road, and later I learned that it was a letter informing their family of the transfer. I didn't know if the letter would reach its destination, but I thought it was a daring act because they could be severely punished if caught. This time, the convoy didn't conceal its route and headed straight to Tan Song on the Saigon, Bien Hoa Highway, about 15 kilometers from Thu Duc Camp. We were unshackled and climbed aboard a ship called Perfume River. Some people said it was the Vietnam Thuong Tin ship, which had previously brought evacuees from Guam back to Vietnam. All 410 of us were crammed into a coal dust-covered hold. The hold was about 200 square meters and 4 meters high, with only one square opening about 6 meters wide at the top. Along the middle of the hold's wall was a makeshift toilet, a wooden frame wrapped in woven straw mats. The toilet consisted of a bore with a hole cut into it and a bucket placed underneath. We had to spread mats on the iron floor of the hold to claim a personal space. But because the hold was so small for 410 people, each person only had enough room to sit, leaning against their belongings. I boarded early and managed to secure a higher spot in the corner of the hold near the coal bags. This helped me greatly because after a day at sea, the waste and urine from the toilet spilled all over the floor. With over 400 people and only one small bucket, it couldn't possibly contain all the waste. Food and water were lowered down from the deck through a rope tied to a bucket. They gave us instant noodles. I suddenly thought of the bears at the Saigon Zoo, which I occasionally visited in the past. We looked like animals trapped in a cage, being fed by caretakers from above. The situation was worse for us. Too many of us in a filthy, cramped hold, while even a few animals were kept in cleaner enclosures. I couldn't eat much during those days because of the stench and exhaustion. Whenever I was too hungry, I tried to nibble on some dry instant noodles and sip a bit of water to minimize the need to use the toilet. I didn't want to step on the filthy floor. The ship left the port as the sun began to rise. I guess it was around 8 a.m. My friend Tuan and I made bets about our destination. I guess somewhere in the north, while Tuan thought we were heading to Con Dao Island, a former prison island that once held serious criminals and political prisoners of South Vietnam's government. I didn't know why I guessed we would go to the north. Perhaps I had heard about previous transfers to the north. I wasn't sure where my friends had been taken, but I knew they had been moved somewhere in northern Vietnam, since Tuan and I were held back for further investigation. There had already been 3 more transfers to the north. I thought this one would probably be no different. We waited for the ship to reach the open sea to determine its direction based on the sun. A few others joined us in speculation. We couldn't be sure whether the ship had reached the sea, but by the first lunch, as the sun tilted westward, we guessed it had. Based on the direction of the clouds and the sun's shadow, we knew the ship was heading north. Everyone was disappointed. Deep down, we had hoped to remain in the south, no matter which camp. Of the 410 detainees, about 50 were from Camp D in Thu Duc. These were individuals who had worked in the South Vietnamese government, police force, or intelligence. Another 50 were from Camp C, mostly from anti-communist groups formed after April 30th, 1975, like the Restoration Force associated with the Catholic Church, or members of Chow Dai and Hoa House sections. The rest were from Tay Ninh, primarily police officers ranging from sergeants to lieutenants, most of whom were younger than us. We were being sent to North Vietnam, a land completely foreign to us despite being part of the same country. We had heard much about the North, its poverty, and the iron-blooded nature of the Northern communists. Perhaps this time, we would see the reality for ourselves. By late afternoon, the ship swayed violently as though caught in a storm. Some became seasick, vomiting throughout the hull, mixing with feces and urine, creating an unbearable stench. Attempts to wash with water only worsened the mess. The areas near the makeshift latrines became contaminated, forcing many to relocate to higher spaces, further crowding the already cramped hold. No one could sleep under such conditions. I sat with my knees drawn up, thinking about my family, my wife and child. How would they cope upon learning I was being sent to an unknown destination? The last time I saw my child, he refused to let me hold him. I wanted to open my backpack to look at a photo, but couldn't because of the tight quarters. Moreover, I didn't want to do so in front of everyone. Although everyone was thinking of their families, we all hid our feelings as best we could. Suddenly, a voice somewhere began singing the song "The Day You Were Gone." The room fell silent as everyone listened, waiting for you 1 or 2 years or my entire youth. One day, as my hair turned gray with frost, still I await our reunion. The song was originally written for a wife whose husband had gone to war, but in our situation, the lyrics resonated profoundly. The singer was Ho, one of the detainees from Tay Ninh. Ho wasn't a professional singer. His voice was unrefined but deeply mournful. He had the appearance of a woman, with delicate features and an effeminate manner. Later, we often jokingly referred to him as Miss Ho. Yet, despite his outward appearance, he possessed a resilience that surprised many. When Ho finished, others took turns singing band yellow music songs. Some used spoons to tap out rhythms. The crowd began to gather around Ho. Nearly 2 years since the so-called liberation, I found myself eagerly listening to these once familiar songs from the past. It was as though everyone momentarily forgot the grim reality we were in. None of us were skilled singers, and we had no instruments, but the old songs seemed to pierce deeply into our hearts. After being bombarded with revolutionary music daily in the camps, we longed for the soothing melodies of yellow music to ease our spirits and evoke memories of the past. In the camps, no one dared to sing such songs for fear of punishment. But in these dire circumstances, no one seemed to care about policies anymore. The impromptu singing lasted until about midnight, but then it gradually waned. Suddenly, a commotion broke out among the detainees from Camp C in Thursday Duk. A fight had erupted. Everyone watched, but no one intervened. A group of younger detainees from the Youth Restoration Force was attacking another detainee they accused of being a camp informant. Informants were detainees suspected of reporting to the guards about others' activities. Sometimes, these suspicions were unfounded, based on dislike or misunderstandings. Other times, it was true. Some became informants hoping to gain favor and an early release. Life in the camp was far more complicated than life outside. Inside, one had to navigate complex relationships and avoid unnecessary confrontations, while also staying out of the guards' crosshairs. For my first day at Long Ton Camp, I adopted a silent endurance approach, avoiding attention. But even so, I often doubted whether I could please everyone. The Vietnamese proverb, "Live so as to please others. Be generous," they laugh. Be reserved, they criticize, came to mind. In the camp, accusations of being an antenna, informant were common and often baseless. I believed the best strategy was to stay silent and observe carefully to protect myself. After some time, 3 detainees from Camp C, Long, Tri, and Dung came over to Camp D spot looking for Yuyin and Don. They believed Yuyin and Don were informants in Camp D. I wasn't sure about this, but I thought it unlikely. Yuyin and Don were educated. Yuyin had graduated from the College of Literature, and Don was an architect. They didn't seem like the type to become dogs for the communists, but who could say for sure? Tuan and I advised them not to act rashly, as we lacked concrete evidence. Besides, what would happen later, given that we were all still in detention? This disturbance interrupted the flow of the yellow music. Everyone returned to their spots, sitting silently against their belongings and gazing up at the sky. Sleep was impossible in such conditions. I closed my eyes and tried to concentrate. Shortly after arriving at the camp, I had begun practicing basic meditation techniques I had learned. Each night before bed, I would sit cross-legged, place my hands on my knees, close my eyes, and focus my thoughts, trying to empty my mind entirely. It helped me detach from the hardships around me. Occasionally, as I drifted into a trance, I felt as light as a feather, as though I could float off the ground. Other times, I fell into deep sleep and dreamt of walking through a field of wildflowers, every step as light as a bird in flight. Or I dreamt of my schoolboy days, carrying books to class, with every step feeling as if wings lifted me off the ground. Upon waking, I tried to analyze those dreams, but couldn't. I realized they were simply the yearning for freedom, a longing born of imprisonment. Early the next morning, a light rain worsened the already dire condition of the ship's hold. The detainees used whatever they could find to shield themselves and their belongings. Rainwater mixed with feces and urine formed slippery, filthy puddles on the floor, making it difficult to move around. The hold grew increasingly squalid, forcing everyone to huddle in their spots, moving only when absolutely necessary. Food and water were lowered into the hold in baskets, and representatives were chosen to distribute them. Despite our hunger and exhaustion, no one could eat or sleep amidst the overpowering stench. I didn't know what horrors awaited us in the northern camp, but I longed to leave this place to escape its unbearable conditions. Sometime after lunch, the ship came to a stop. Former South Vietnamese Navy personnel among us speculated that we had docked somewhere in central Vietnam, perhaps Cam Ranh or Da Nang ports, as it was too early to reach the north. I wasn't sure if they were right, but deep down, I hoped we were being taken to a camp in the central region, where at least we'd still be in a part of our homeland. Northern Vietnam was alien to us, even though it was technically part of the country. Clinging to this hope, we packed our belongings into our backpacks, ready to disembark. At the very least, we would no longer be confined to this filthy hold. We waited and waited and continued waiting until night fell. The rain persisted but lessened. Unlike the usual instant noodles, we were given watermelon for dinner. With nothing to cut it, we smashed the melons on the floor. The rinds, tossed into the muck, only worsened the mess in the hold. But no one cared. Everyone was focused on leaving this miserable place. As night fully enveloped us, the hatch of the hold was thrown open. A ladder was lowered for us to climb onto the deck. Faint outlines of small islands appeared in the distance, along with a few distinctive northern-style sailboats with pleated sails. It became clear we had arrived at Haiphong Harbor. There was no longer any hope of remaining in the south or even the central region. We were now in northern Vietnam, the heart of communist territory. Everyone felt a profound sense of disappointment. On the other side of the ship, detainees emerged from another hold we hadn't known existed. We were lined up in pairs, with handcuffs linking each pair before we disembarked. My right hand was shackled to the left hand of my friend Engip. As we made our way across the planks connecting the ship to the shore, our movements were awkward and difficult. If one person's hand moved, The other had to follow in the same direction to avoid twisting our arms. I heard that during disembarkation, 2 men from the other hold fell into the sea and disappeared without anyone rescuing them. Some believed they had committed suicide, but I thought one had slipped and dragged the other down due to handcuffs and the heavy loads they were carrying. A line of buses awaited us at the harbor. Engeep and I were among the first aboard, so we found seats in the middle of the first bus. It was around 6 p.m., but the gloomy drizzle made it feel much later. April in the north was still cold, with drizzly rain and chilling winds, just as I had read about in books describing the region. From my seat near the driver, I could see the desolate harbor outside. The pier, ravaged by bombs, lay in ruins. In the distance, lights from sailboats flickered across a long bay, and the silhouettes of small islands resembled giant sea monsters emerging from the water. It was one of Vietnam's natural wonders, but we were in no position to appreciate it. A cadre handed each of us a loaf of bread for the journey while we waited on the bus. The convoy began moving around midnight. I assumed the communists preferred operating under the cover of darkness. This was the 4th time I'd been relocated since my imprisonment, the first from Chuvan in school to Long Tan, the second from Long Tan to Thudak, the third from Thudak to Tan Song, and now this journey to the north. Each time, the relocation had begun at midnight, seemingly a communist habit. The convoy passed through what I assumed to be parts of the city of Haiphong, Vietnam's second largest city. I caught glimpses of thatched houses interspersed with brick buildings. Some structures were a mix of brick and thatch. The road was pockmarked with bomb craters, remnants of war. The city was enveloped in darkness, with only a few colonial-era kerosene lamps providing dim light. I saw a cafe illuminated by a neon sign. The cadre accompanying us warned us to close the bus windows to avoid being pelted with stones by angry locals who considered us their wartime enemies. However, I saw no sign of hostility, only a few curious children casting indifferent glances at the convoy. A few bicycles, overloaded with goods, moved along the streets. The city was eerily silent in the dead of night. The convoy exited the city after a few minutes. I guess it was just the outskirts. The moon was out. I tried to look outside to observe the daily life of the people in the north, but saw nothing. Feeling tired and hungry after 2 days on the ship, I ate a little bread, drank some water, and fell asleep. I woke up startled in the early morning as the convoy drove through a forest. There were a few people pushing heavily loaded bicycles on the roadside. It was the first time I had seen the so-called cargo bicycles of the north. These bikes consisted only of a frame and 2 wheels. A long wooden stick was attached to the handlebars for easier steering, and heavy loads were tied to the frame. People couldn't sit on the seat. There wasn't one. They had to walk beside the bike, steering it with their left hand and balancing it with their right. This mode of transportation had become famous during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu for transporting weapons and ammunition. Women walked along the roadside carrying or balancing large bundles of firewood on their heads. The poverty of the North was evident in these scenes. In the early morning, the convoy turned onto a bumpy path that cut through a forest of Bodhi trees. At a stream, the first vehicle stopped to wait for the others, and then the entire convoy proceeded to drive straight through the water. The stream's current was strong, and we were nervous as we were locked inside the vehicles with handcuffs on. The driver seemed familiar with the route and drove slowly, crossing the stream with ease. After crossing 3 similar streams, we reached a large river. A cadre informed us it was a branch of the Red River, the largest river in the north. I wondered how we would cross such a large river without a bridge. This wasn't a shallow stream. I saw a sloping road leading straight to the riverbank. The convoy stopped for about an hour, until a small ferry arrived from the other side. It was a small motorboat towing a bamboo raft that could only carry one vehicle at a time. Since our vehicle was at the front of the convoy, we boarded the ferry first. The river was swift due to the high water season. The ferry traveled upstream, pulling the vehicle across, and then a few people on the bank secured a cable to the ferry to pull it ashore with a pulley system. The ferry then returned to bring another vehicle across. Everything unfolded like a scene from an ancient tale. It took 5 hours to complete the crossing for the entire convoy. My right wrist was swollen. The handcuffs were too tight. Even though my wrists were small, I tried to massage it with my left hand. Sitting beside me, Engeep said nothing, seemingly asleep, though I knew he was awake. I asked the cadre for permission to relieve myself, and Engeep and I stepped out together to a bush by the roadside. I felt somewhat lighter afterward. Villagers stared at us curiously. Some children in shorts and patched shirts shouted, "Noi! Noi!" a term for the South Vietnamese government forces, but no one threw stones as we had been warned. I wanted to ask them a few questions, but didn't dare. Some prisoners tossed them pieces of bread, which they eagerly grabbed and ate. A few children ran closer to the vehicles to ask for watermelon, and the cadres had to shoo them away. The convoy resumed its journey in the afternoon. Forest gave way more forest, and mountains followed mountains. The convoy crossed several streams. I dozed off on the bench seat, waking with the dawn. The convoy rattled along a bomb-cratered road. Tea plantations appeared on both sides, reminiscent of the road to the Lat City in the Central Highlands. Here and there, groups of people with baskets on their backs move among the neatly planted rows of tea bushes, picking leaves. A few locals rode bicycles on the road, hose tied to the sides of their bikes. They were on their way to work on agricultural cooperatives' farms. We had heard about land reform in North Vietnam since 1955. No one owned land anymore. Everything belonged to the cooperatives. In the 10 lessons we were taught when entering the re-education camp, we learned that land and production tools were shared among the people. The Viet Cong claimed it was collective ownership, but we joked. Those who work less earn less, those who work more earn more, and those who don't work get everything. We entered a small town in the early morning. I saw a banner reading People's Committee of Phu Tho Township on a red background hanging in front of a brick building with a flagpole displaying a red flag with a yellow star, the flag of North Vietnam. Phu, though was part of Vinh Phu province, formed from the old provinces of Vinh Yen and Phu Tho in the Midland region of North Vietnam. The town was tiny, with only a few brick houses. Most were thatched. Fields of cassava and tea hills clearly marked the region's specialties. Melia trees lined the fields and roadsides. Locals used melia wood to build their thatch houses because its bitter sap deterred termites. During this season, the trees were blooming with pale purple flowers. Hills were planted with fan palms, whose leaves were used to roof houses. While people in the South used nipa palm leaves for thatching, Northerners used fan palm leaves. Most houses in the area were made of mud walls with a small pond in front. Later, I learned that villagers dug ponds to obtain soil for building their house foundations and walls, while the ponds were used for raising fish. After passing Phu Tho, the convoy turned onto a rugged road leading into a forest. Distant mountain ranges came into view. Some mountain villagers, curious about the passing convoy, stared at us. They were ethnic minorities, Thai, Hmong, or Tay. I wasn't sure. All carried baskets on their backs and axes in their hands. The hills surrounded the valleys. Terraced rice fields on the slopes resembled snakes slithering out of their lairs. Elevated wooden houses with high, curved roofs were a distinctive feature of the mountainous region. Dirty children with distended bellies played beside roaming pigs. Dogs lay idly on porches. Everything seemed to look at us with curiosity as we passed by. In this remote area, cars were an unusual sight. Around noon, the convoy crossed a wide, fast-flowing stream named Amai at a ferry dock named Ben Nak, then drove onto a 6-meter wide clay road. Along the road, there were more thatched houses. A brick building surrounded by a bamboo and barbed wire fence bore a sign reading Agricultural and Industrial School No. 1. Children aged 10 to 15, dressed in faded blue uniforms, were working in the surrounding fields under the supervision of uniformed policemen. I wondered if they were prisoners or students of school. Finally, the convoy stopped at the gate of the camp. We had arrived at Tan Lap Re-Education Camp in Vinh Phu Province after a day and a half of travel from Haiphong Port. It was around noon on April 20th, 1977.